Welcome into Fox 9 Sports Live. I'm Ahmad Hicks. This is Jeff Wald, and we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Minnesota Twins. They haven't been good lately, and that's just kind of putting it mildly. So, Jeff, what's been the problem for this team?
Well, first of all, let's note that the first time we did this show, Ahmad was standing on a box to be my height. He's now standing on an even taller box, so he's taller than me.
It's the same box, just raised just a little bit.
This is the 6'9".
This is what it's like to be 6'9", 6'10", you know?
Getting back to the A topic to start this little show today, Twins are 40-42. They get swept at Atlanta. They get outscored 13-3 over the course of 3 games. Rocco Baldelli closes the clubhouse to media after yesterday's game, does not allow access to any reporters to get access to players. Mm-hmm. He just says his piece post-game, as most any of you that watched the game and saw on Valley Sports North. He was not happy. He was clearly very frustrated. He sounded like a man who was out of answers. And when a man is out of answers at the midway point of a baseball season, that's not good, folks. They are a half game out of the Central Division. The first time all season that the Twins have not been in first place. I believe they've been in first place since the first game of the year. Mm-hmm. So, yes, absolutely there is cause for concern. You've had, we talked about earlier today that they've had the best starting rotation pitching-wise, arguably in my lifetime, in probably the last 3 decades.
In quite some time.
At least since they won the World Series. Mm-hmm. They had a chance in the early 2000s with Liriano and Santana. Liriano couldn't stay healthy. We all know how that went for Twins fans. They are simply wasting really good starting pitching. I mean, you have a lineup where half the lineup's not hitting 200 right now. Carlos Correa is just above 200. Mm-hmm. Max Kepler has been awful. Mm-hmm. Joey Gallo is a strikeout machine, and they sort of knew that.
Everybody's been a strikeout machine.
They sort of knew that in the offseason when they signed him. They knew they were taking a chance on Joey Gallo. Right now, I believe he's hitting 198, and he leads the team with, I want to say it's like low 90s in strikeouts, which is just pathetic. I mean, to me, it's mostly what approach are you taking at the plate when you have runners in scoring position. We've seen too many players like Byron Buxton and Joey Gallo take called third strikes. Mm-hmm. Just simply not enough clutch hitting. And then you have a guy, you have the manager Rocco in the clubhouse after yesterday's game, have his version of a meltdown, and he doesn't really have too many answers. And for me, when I hear the words that he said in the tone that he said them, if they don't find a way to turn this thing around in the final 80 games, you might be looking at some off-season changes both in the front office and with the coaching staff.
I think we need a bucket of ice right now because Jeff is on fire. He is hot right now, and he is letting it all go. So is it safe to say that the Twins need to lock up the AL Central in order for them to go to the playoffs? Because when you look at the rest of the American League, you have the Rangers with a 49-31 record, and then you have Tampa Bay who's 55-28. Not to mention teams right behind them in that conference alone. So it's going to be tough sledding for the Twins, if they don't win out.
100%. As we noted to start the show, 40-42. They're now a half game behind the Guardians for first place in the AL Central. The facts are the facts. As our colleague Justin Guard says, the truth cannot be controversial. the Tampa Bay Rays lead the AL East at 55-28. The Baltimore Orioles, who I will actually be in Baltimore to watch the Twins play the Orioles tomorrow night, visiting some family out there. The Orioles are 17 games over 500 in the AL East, and they trail the Tampa Bay Rays by 5 games. Think about that for a second. One team in the AL Central, the Guardians, actually, now that I look at it, nobody in the Central is above 500 right now. They're 39-40 and have the division lead. How pathetic
speaks
is that?
Volumes. Yes, it speaks volumes about the. So where do they go? How do they rectify the situation that they're in right now? Because clearly you're getting what you need out of your starting rotation. Right. Because last year the story was they couldn't make it past 4 to 5 innings. They're making it past 4 to 5 innings. All of their pitchers now have at least half of their starts have been quality starts. So you're getting what you need, but where do you go? Do you need to make some trades? Do you need to bolster your bullpen, or do you need to bring in another bat?
I think you need to bring in a bat, if not 2. Mm-hmm. I think you need to think about maybe dealing Max Kepler. He's been the subject of trade rumors for multiple seasons now. Maybe there's a reason why he's still with the Twins. Maybe no other teams wanted him. Mm-hmm. Who knows? I mean, he's dealt with a few injuries here and there. I think by and large they're healthy enough to where if they should be consistent enough at the plate, they can provide the offense to win games. That hasn't happened the last 2 weeks. It hasn't happened consistently all year. Like we talked about earlier with the strikeouts, they lead all of Major League Baseball in strikeouts. They're on pace to strike out, I think it's well over 1,600 times, which would shatter the 2021 record set by the Chicago Cubs. It comes down to just having a better approach at the plate, especially when there's guys on base. Because the reality is, if I'm watching a game right now and I see the Twins have bases loaded, 1 out, runners at second and third with 1 out, a runner in scoring position with nobody out, I have no confidence right now that they're going to get a run home.
Maybe if they tried out Emilio Pagan, they could get some runs home. He has not been good this year. His win probability added is probably one of the worst in the majors since 2021, and he's just a couple of slots away from being the worst pitcher this year with in terms of a WPA. So they clearly have a lot of work to do, both in the pitching department.
That's what they say.
He does in low leverage situations, not high leverage situations. So that's the problem for them right now. So as we're recording this, the Twins have lost 4 out of their last 5 games. They have a road series coming up with the Baltimore Orioles. So hopefully they can piece things together, and we'll of course touch base on them later on this summer. Now we're going to switch topics. We're talking basketball now. The NBA draft just took place, and Karl-Anthony Towns is still on the Minnesota Timberwolves roster. Is that a problem, Jeff? Is that a problem for this team?
For now. Is it a problem? No. I mean, he's your quote-unquote franchise player. He's the centerpiece of your team. Now,
but that's debatable because everyone knows it's Anthony Edwards' time.
And they're not wrong when they say that. I think he is the future centerpiece of this team, but I think if you're talking about the right now, I think it's Cat, because you're talking about a player who they've invested a Supermax contract in. You're talking about it starting, I believe, in 2 years, the 2024 season. He's going to be starting a 4-year, $224 million contract. And I think that's part of the problem with these trade rumors is that if you really are going to take that step and get rid of him, you've got to find a partner in the dance. You've got to find somebody who will be willing to match you what you want in return to get that contract all set.
Right.
That's going to be at least one starting player. It's probably multiple first-round picks.
Absolutely.
It's not an easy decision for any franchise to make.
Are first-round picks in the NBA really that valuable, though? If we're talking about teams that make the playoffs, have a bottom 16 draft pick, is it really that big of a deal? Because if you can't name 5 players outside of the top 10.
I couldn't name players out of the top 3 this year.
That speaks volumes, I think, about the NBA draft. And you see teams every year give up ones and up until 2031 or swap picks until 2032. Like, the NBA draft is not as important as the NFL draft or the NHL draft or the MLB draft. So I don't think draft picks matter here.
I think the focus is the value. If you're really going to part ways with a $224 million contract, you have to get some sort of comparable value in return. And that's where we talk about starting caliber players. We talk about future first-round draft picks. You mentioned how worthy are they? Well, that's where the talent evaluators come into play in the front office. But the bottom line here is that we've had weeks now of speculation, and Karl-Anthony Towns has chosen not to put it to bed. I mean, you talk about him going on Patrick Beverley's podcast a few weeks ago saying, "Oh, I see everybody in Minnesota is trying to sell my house, but me." And then he says, "I'll tell you what, that there's as much truth or false to the rumors as Minnesota wants there to be." What are we supposed to do with that? I mean, the correct answer there, if you're Karl-Anthony Towns, is to say, listen, guys, I'm aware that my name's being thrown out there. I'm in Minnesota. I'm where I want to be. I'm with the Timberwolves. End of story.
Well, that's what you get from a mature player who's a veteran, who's experienced in winning, and who knows the highs and lows of the NBA. I think Karl-Anthony Towns only knows the lows, and so he's been picked on quite a bit, especially from media here in Minnesota, rightfully so. So he's on the defense, and he wants to kind of be smart about things, which, look, I can't blame him, especially when you've been in that spot for the last 3 to 4 years of your career. But
we all know who is the biggest fan of Karl-Anthony Towns.
Cat himself.
Karl-Anthony Towns.
Or his girlfriend Jordan Woods, but we're not going to touch base on those topics. He has a lot of fans, obviously, and his family being probably his number 1 biggest fan. But I think Karl has talent. But I think what the question is, does that talent fit on the Minnesota Timberwolves roster? And I mean, when you have 3 players between Naz Reid, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert set to make nearly $500 million in the next 4 to 5 seasons, are you telling me that you need 3 centers on your team making $93 million next season? The answer is no. They need some depth around them. And so we'll talk about the draft picks, what they tried to do. They went after Leonard Miller. He's a forward, played in the G League last year with the Ignite. He actually played with Scoot Henderson, the number 3 overall pick. And he's talented. 6'10" guy, 210 pounds. He used to be a guard back in the day. So he's still getting acclimated towards being a big man, but he brings a lot of athleticism, a lot of youth to the team, and maybe some type of outside presence that can fill in for a Karl-Anthony Towns if he does go on the move.
Well, before I go there, I want to go back to Naz Reid a little bit because a lot was made of that signing here earlier this week. 3 years, $42 million. Why didn't I care about basketball more in high school and college? I mean, that's we're talking. I mean, in all seriousness, we're talking about a guy who is a reserve player. He got a huge opportunity last year when Cat went down with that calf injury. He missed 53 games, so naturally Naz Reid steps into one of those roles with Gobert. We never got to really see the Cat and Gobert combination come together last year. And that's also part of the reason why they're probably. I mean, I would be stunned if they traded Cat. That's part of the reason why is we want to see how that comes together.
I think we all know how that's going to work. You have a guy who wants to be a 3 or 4 guy and a guy who can't even score a bucket unless it's an alley-oop in the 5. Like, it's going to clog up the paint for everybody, and you need space for Anthony Edwards to drive and get to the paint. And Karl-Anthony Towns is not your knockdown corner shooter, although we saw that video with him saying lab work, shooting threes inside the gym. That's not where he should be putting in his work in the lab. It should be in the paint. But that's another story. I'm not head coach Chris Finch, so I can't tell him what to do.
Regardless, we're talking about a largely reserve player in Nasri getting $42 million, honestly doing his own work to get there. Let's credit him for doing the work to get himself in that position with these draft picks. I personally don't know either of them very well. I've heard of the name Leonard Miller.
And Jalen Clark from UCLA.
And I can't say I'm very, very familiar with him. Basically, what you're looking for them to do is go to Vegas, go to Summer League, do your thing, make an impact.
Well, Jalen Clark's not going to play. He ruptured his Achilles at UCLA, so he still has a recovery time to go through. So he said he's itching to get on the court. He asked Tim Connolly the other day if he could shoot the ball. He told him absolutely not until he signs his contract, and they go through everything. So he's itching to get out there, but we won't see Jalen Clark this year.
The one thing I do like is that before the draft happened and before they got those picks, you did see a lot of the current roster at Mayo Clinic Square working out. A lot of it was with the
Nas was there as soon as he signed his contract.
With the pre-draft prospects as well. So you like to see that chemistry forming this time of year, because once training camp hits, it's 100 miles an hour for 6 months until you figure out if you're in the playoffs or not. You really hope Leonard Miller can be, a piece off the bench, stay healthy, make your impact, do your thing in Vegas. See what the bright lights bring, and let's see what we got.
I don't know if he has a spot this year. The Timberwolves have so many big men on their roster, especially Luka Garza, who's still there, who got sparing minutes last year. So a lot of questions surrounding this Timberwolves team, especially their 4 and 5 positions, and we have a whole offseason to go through before they have to make a decision, and I'm sure that this Karl-Anthony Towns subject will linger on until the NBA trade deadline next year. So that's it for the Fox 9 Sports Live right now with our updates with the Minnesota Twins and the Timberwolves. Vikings camp right around the corner, so we'll be ramping up our football coverage here as well, but that'll do it for another edition of Fox 9 Sports Live. That's Jeff Wald. I'm Ahmad Hicks. You all have a wonderful day.